on Off the Ball.
Okay, you're welcome, Max. So it's time to review the Sunday papers. We have with us Tommy Conlon from the Sunday Independent and Declan Bogue as well, a freelance journalist. We are streaming as well as broadcasting to you on the radio, all our social channels if you want to watch as well as listen. So I'll start with the back pages. The Sunday World here has football's coming home, ... to your living rooms, that is, as games to resume without fans. This is Kevin Palmer. And it says English football chiefs are stepping up their efforts to restart matches in June after being informed by the UK government that they may not be able to open the doors to their stadiums for more than a year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Beneath that story on the Sunday World, no plastic paddies. This is Stephen Kenny. He was speaking to journalists during the week. Players on the radar will get one call and one call only from Stephen Kenny, and if they don't say yes, I'm in, then they ain't getting that second call. Next to the Star, deal or no deal. This is Hammers after cut price Dyer switch. That's West Ham chasing Kieran Dyer. Next we have Sun Sport. There is a picture of Jose Mourinho and Dele Alli. Thankfully, unlike earlier in the week, it's not Dele Alli and Jose Mourinho training and flouting the rules. It seems both men are out for a walk and they spot each other across the road and they have a big wave, and I think it was Dele Alli's birthday as well. So they had a chat to each other across a North London street. And then beneath that, Stephen Kenny again, I'm not here to convince people to be Irish. So a similar theme to what was in the Sunday World back page. Kenny refuses to beg anyone to play, and it's Owen Kaiser here. Stephen Kenny will consider picking any player eligible for an Irish passport, but only choose those who apply themselves. Sunday Mirror, they go again with Stephen Kenny. I won't beg you to play for your country. Kenny, players have to want to declare for us. I'm not going to ask twice. That is the lead in the Sunday Mirror. Mail on Sunday, slightly different. I want my team to be like ... Brentford. Stephen Kenny reveals his vision for a new Ireland. So over the course of his conference chat with the various Sunday journalists, Stephen Kenny mentioned that he had been over to Brentford to see how they work. They're in the Championship. They have lots of very impressive data-driven methodologies and systems, and they seem to be one of the success stories and the more progressive teams in English football. So Stephen Kenny has spent some time over there. And then a fantastic picture, totally different here on the front page of the Sunday Independent. It's a picture of Nicolas Roche, because he has been speaking with Paul Kimmage, and it is Roche shaving, looking at himself in the mirror. Through the looking glass is the headline. A lot of the mirror is all steamed up, but he's brushed a bit of steam away to look at himself in the mirror. So we'll come to that interview inside. Loads of really good stuff in that. And then the Sunday Times sports section is inside, so there's no lead as such. Tommy Conlon of the Sunday Independent, you're there. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Great to have you with us. These are strange times. One of the things we're able to do, though, increasingly is get people on the paper review who don't usually travel, because not everyone lives in Dublin, Tommy, I'm told.
Apparently not, Joe. I'm based in Limerick, so technology. I got my tech guy in during the week, observing all the social distancing protocols, of course. Paddy, and he set me up with the old Skype, so we're good to go, hopefully.
Great, lovely to have you with us. We're just having a touch of trouble connecting with Declan, but he should be with us momentarily.
Right.
Let's start with Stephen Kenny there for a moment. So there are various pieces on Kenny and various angles on Kenny. The back pages, seen as I've brought them up, and that seems to be the lead in terms of what the Sunday journalists have gone with, and it is Stephen Kenny effectively saying, look, by all means, emigration is a big part of this country's history, and if you want to come and play for this country and you're qualified, I will make the phone call. But if you don't tell me yes straight away, if you dilly-dally, if you want follow-up phone calls, then no thank you. I suspect a huge number, the vast majority of Irish fans have become fed up with players dilly-dallying over the last couple of years, and they will welcome this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And he says, basically, I'm not in the business of persuading people to be Irish. And I like the way he put that. And the plastic paddy quote, I don't think he actually says that himself.
No.
And, some London Irish or Manchester Irish and people of Irish descent in Britain might might balk at that term of, that old sort of kind of slur plastic Paddy, but I don't think Kenny uses it himself. But he like a lot of things he says, there's a conviction to it, and a clarity about it. And he says, I'm not in the business of persuading people to be Irish, and that's a pretty neat summation of it. And but then he's much more subtle than that as well, because of course he says, then he's asked, does that mean an end to any player not born on the island from playing for the Republic? And he says, not at all. Immigration is a strong part of Irish culture, always has been. We find players who grew up in Irish communities in Britain, who came back here for school, who realise that Irishness is a part of their lives. We'll always welcome them on our teams. And I think most people would go along with that too.
Yeah. And he goes on to say that you'll get one phone call, and if the answer is not an enthusiastic yes, writes John Brennan here in the Sunday World, then there won't be a second call. And that is fair enough, because otherwise it does become too much of a career opportunity for too many players.
Although I'd enter a caveat into that, because going back to Jack Charlton's time in the mid-80s and onwards, there were fellas who kind of about whom it was joked, they drank a pint of Guinness and they were suddenly playing for Ireland. There were fellas who had a very superficial, almost didn't even know what their Irish roots were, discovered an Irish connection, got the Irish passport, ended up playing for Ireland, and those guys give magnificent service. And it goes back to a feeling or a belief I have myself that really identity of its own, I don't think makes a big difference to a player's performance. I think character is what makes a difference to a player's performance. And we frequently see it in the Premier League in England and in professional sports all over the world. A guy rocks up to a new club, no prior connections to it whatsoever, certainly no birth connection to it, and gives 100% every week, because that's in his nature.
Yeah. And
you can have fellas born, you take the GAs as a classic kind of, which as you know, has huge emphasis on this organic connection between where you're from and who you play for. There are lots of fellas who play GA games who are unreliable, inconsistent, who basically didn't have the heart. And being from their county or club, it didn't really make any difference to how they performed, really.
No, I accept that totally. It's a well-made point. Would you like a manager, for instance, how far do you take it? Do you have any problem, for instance, with the players who didn't know much about their Irishness, who Jack approached, and they kind of vaguely, it rang a bell somewhere that their granny might have been Irish, they hadn't been to the country before, had no affinity to it, but Jack asked them and they said, yeah, I'll go play, and they gave 100%. Do you have an issue with that? Never did.
In fact, it was kind of I always found it quite amusing in ways. It was kind of part of, it was in a way it was an antidote to kind of to a kind of a sort of a puritanical kind of nationalism. It was kind of like, let's be fairly flexible and inclusive in our definition of what it means to be Irish and putting on the green jersey. There was it's proven now. That was the testing ground back in the mid 80s and onwards under Jack. Fellas who played for Ireland that and it, at one level there was a comedic value in it, in how slender their connection was, and yet they went out and played brilliantly for the country, and everyone loved it. It never became an issue, and part of it was that one of the nice sort of kind of side effects of it all was that those lads themselves kind of discovered their roots and a sense of Irishness as they went along, and actually found their own identity in the process too. But the main thing was that they were good enough to play for Ireland. They justified it by their performances on the pitch, and with the heart and commitment and that they gave to the cause. And so by their own deeds, they made it irrelevant, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. And I suppose if you do have a problem with that approach, with Jack's approach and somebody, you know, just saying, oh, well, I don't know much about the country, but sure, I'll come and play, then you get into a weird kind of a grey, as in how Irish is Irish enough? Do you have to have been there on 3 school holidays? Do you need to know a couple of focal? There's no arbitrary way of drawing that line.
Very true. I was just thinking of that in terms of Stephen Kenny's comments here about lads who came back here for the school holidays and all like that. And as you say, well, would you have someone from the FAI going, well, how many school holidays did you come here? And what was the music collection back in the house? Did you just have the Dubliners and the Chieftains and the like, or was it the old rock and roll? Yeah, I see that. And you know, ultimately it'll come down to, are you good enough, and have you got the heart, have you got the soul?
Yeah.
And we do love sportsmen, not just Irish people, but we do love sportsmen who play with their souls, you know, as well as their talents. And virtually all of those Irish lads who are, let's say, Anglo-Irish or London Irish lads who came and played for Ireland did us proud and did themselves proud, I think.
If we turn inside, Tommy, to page 78 of the Mail. So Philip Quinn has detailed a lot of what Stephen Kenny said to the Sunday journalists. I'm sure people have seen some of his dispatches over the last few days, but it's the first time we've heard what he had to say to the Sunday papers. Yeah. So he did a conference from his home in Louth, as we know. Philip writes, no question was off limits, but anything Kenny didn't like, he declined politely to answer. Such a question, for instance, was whether he'd have taken the Ireland job with another manager waiting in the wings to succeed him. He replied it was hypothetical and very difficult to answer, so he didn't answer it. He was asked what he made of John Delaney's demise, and he said, what else can I say that hasn't been written already? Then, though, Philip points out that when he was asked about the characteristics he wanted in midfielders, Kenny spoke for 1,100 words, and he is more than happy, I suspect, to talk for a long period of time about the intricacies of midfield play. What have you made generally of how he's performed, what he's had to say to the media across this week? He has, personally, imbued me with a sense of hope. It is almost surreal to have somebody in the position of manager who's prioritising the things that I suspect most of the country wanted prioritised a long time ago.
Yeah, to go back to your first point about midfielders. Well, look, we've all been tearing our hair out in frustration at exactly that problem, as you know. And I remember making a note back for the Ireland-Switzerland game when Mick McCarthy was in charge. I'm not great with the dates now, but it was the game in Dublin, and there was, excuse me, a moment in the first half, late in the first half, when Jeff Hendrick gets on the ball, and he's got his back. He's facing his own goal when he receives the ball in midfield, but he has time. We can see, looking on, he has time to turn around, pick a pass, but instead he goes back to a defender, back to his full back. And the reason we noticed that one, I mean, that's been done thousands of times with Irish midfielders. The reason I noticed at the time was because you could clearly hear on the sideline microphones Mick McCarthy shouting, Jeff, turn. And just as he said that, Hendrick got the ball back again, and instead of turning and looking up and looking to go forward, back again to the defender. And that was just in one cameo. So much of the frustration I think we all felt about watching the Ireland team under O'Neill and subsequently Mick, and indeed back to Trapattoni's time. And if Stephen Kenny has a vision for changing that would be a hell of a good start.
Yes, I mean, the hope we all have is that he's done it with Dundalk, he's done it with the under-21s. He can give the team a framework which allows Jeff Hendrick to turn with a bit more confidence, because he might know what's going to happen around him, and the whole thing might start to work in a way that we've wondered, can it? You know, do we have the players, is the great debate of the last 10 years. We're about to find out.
But Joe, on that question of giving a player like a Hendrick permission to turn, should he not be doing that himself?
You would think so, yeah. But you know, it's funny. You talk to even the likes of Kev Kilban, who's in here at times, and you chat to him on air and off air, and you'd say, you know, why can't you do a bit more? We see you doing it in the Premier League, for instance. And he was saying,
I'll turn off the lights here, see if it's
Go on, yeah. He was saying, you know, so often we underestimate the pressure of an international game. You know, you might have 6, 7, 8 games to qualify for a tournament. So, like in a Premier League match, they're a dime a dozen. They're not going to define your career to the same extent. You can get on the ball, you can turn, you can take a chance if you lose the ball and a goal is scored. You won't be remembered for that for the next 10 years by the entire country. Whereas when you step up to play international football, it's a week of media attention and scrutiny. You're on national television, there's 1 million people watching. Players tighten up, you know, and that was, I thought, a very plausible explanation, for instance, as to why someone like Glenn Whelan would get in the ball a whole lot more for Stoke than primarily he would for Ireland in the main. I know he's done it a bit laterally under Mick, but that point of pressure and comfort actually is probably underestimated by us on the outside. And maybe a manager's job is to get everyone out there as comfortable as possible.
Fair point by Kevin, and he was there. He's been there, and that's an argument that deserves respect. But I'm not sure it gives them a get out of jail clause when you pick up a ball in midfield and you have space around you, and you haven't even the basic confidence or the courage to turn with the ball and try and pick a forward pass. I mean, I don't know. I think for trained professionals playing at international level, that should be a basic.
It should be. But then, you know, lots of things which should be aren't always the case. Human nature is a frail thing. I
agree.
The interesting line and the point of difference that John Giles down the years on television has often made with coaches is, you know, Bill Hurley might turn to him and say, but, you know, the manager says he's encouraging the team to play, and Giles would often respond with, well, there's a difference between encouraging they play and insisting that they play, and maybe Stephen Kenny's going to do a bit more insisting.
Yeah, but the less insisting, you think generally, the less insisting a manager has to do on basic principles, you would think the better. You would think that at that stage that a player will have enough conviction and confidence to do it himself. I mean, that's sounds almost like holding the player's hand almost. They're out there.
Yeah, to an extent it is, but again, we're dealing in realities here and not what should be the case.
Well, then if Stephen Kettler, then if as John Giles says, that the managers, is John's point, the managers be a bit less vague about it and be absolutely adamant, you get on that ball in midfield and you turn and you play the ball forward.
Correct.
And that's non-negotiable. Then maybe that would clarify it for them.
I think that's exactly it, actually.
Right.
That's precisely the point.
Right.
Philip Quinn does write also that, and again, this is kind of a new thing in Irish football, if you go back even over the last couple of tenures, that Stephen Kenny is going to be, in effect, he says, like a godfather of the Irish football family. So, you know, he's going to know about he knows about all the under-15 players, and there's going to be monthly meetings, presentations, updates, and challenges to every manager from Jim Crawford to Andy Reid with the 18s, Paul O'Sam, the 16s, Jason Donoghue, 15s. Kenny effectively is going to oversee what Philip Quinn describes as Team Ireland, and you know, join the dots effectively in a way which the senior team has never cared much to do previously.
Well, that sounds good. And he'll be based on the island, which is no small consideration, number one. He'll be here to do it. And that sort of vertical structure from under-15s to the international men's team, if he can supervise that and presumably encourage them and give them develop that sort of homogenous sort of system of play from from youths right up to seniors, and if he can help to do that, that sounds good. But I would still, in fact, it sounds very good, and kind of an integrated role. But rightly or wrongly, we've been conditioned to expecting that the manager of the men's national team gets results and gets us to tournaments.
I'm less conditioned to think that these days, I must confess.
Right. Yeah. 'Cause it pulls the train along, though, Joe. You know that.
Oh, sure.
But having said that, arguing against myself, Big Jack pulled the train along, and what happened in the years afterwards. In fact, the supply lines that were supposed to flourish in the aftermath of Big Jack's time, and indeed Mick's time, first time round, totally went sterile. It was like, in terms of productivity, in terms of harnessing, turning that golden era into new golden generations, it's like it never happened.
Yeah, it seems like a wasted opportunity, really, a wasted gift, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Just on the page previous to Philip Quinn, Shane McGrath takes issue with James McLean, who hit back very strongly against Stephen Hunt and Gary Breen, because both Hunt and Breen had questioned Kenny to a point, and he said, well, he's operating at a level he hasn't operated at before. And I think McLean said something to the effect that, Stephen Hunt's best known for his clash with Peter Cech, so for him to give an opinion on Stephen Kenny is a joke. And, it was that kind of a response. Shane McGrath makes the wider point that what James McLean and Kenny's more vociferous backers need to accept is that their man will now be subject to great scrutiny in his new role. And this should not be taken as a slight. Kenny's job is the most prominent one in Irish sport, and he has taken it in controversial circumstances. That is going to be one of the interesting things to watch over the next while. Is Kenny? You said he's living on the island. Brian Kerr's talked about how difficult that is. Suddenly, the amount of scrutiny on him is going to go through the roof, and that's one of the big challenges that he's going to have to hurdle. He talked about it yesterday with John Duggan. I've no doubt he will, but it's going to be a big change for him.
Yeah. The likes of myself, who's not in the front line on the beat as the football reporters are, they would have a much better, I presume, understanding of Kenny as a character. And it is a character thing. Where we were discussing a little bit about midfield, and he, as you saw there, Stephen Kenny was also talking about 4-4-3 and 4-2-3-1. But so much of management, one can say, across all sports, is actually down to the chemistry between the manager and his players. That indefinable, intangible connection between the manager's personality and his character and the players. And part of that, I guess, my impressions of Stephen Kenny are superficial.
Sure.
But I do believe you can get glimpses from what they say and how they say it. And so far, it's been impressive to me from those glimpses.
And what have you seen that's impressed you, Tommy? What have you liked?
His articulacy, just his pure ability to articulate an idea or an argument. His clarity of thinking, and the understated sort of, not belligerent, but a sort of understated authority. These are just vibes you pick up, and a sense of a real internal core that's there. And I like what I see so far, but can't advance any opinions on him beyond that.
Yeah, a lot of people are in that holding pattern. Very promising, and yet we're months away from the test, I suppose. And one last point just to finish on, and then we're going to take news headlines, and I want to get to your piece as well in the Sunday Independent, which is vaguely connected. But one other point, I think, Kenny, if he's really trying to change things here, which he is, should be afforded arguably more patience than the manager who's pragmatically trying to eke out the 1-0 wins.
Yeah, we can't be chopping and changing. We can't be like... the short-termism has to kind of stop. And so even though across all sports, the climate of contemporary sport is so short-term in everything, in all sports, and where once, I don't know how you can measure these things, but there was once where it'd be give a manager a couple of years, let him settle down, give him a proper chance, and it's like that sort of unquantified but unspoken decent time span that a manager could be given, or indeed a player at a new club, it seems to have been eroded and eroded and eroded to the point now where 2 games maybe, and there'll be the first questions, or there'll be the first grumblings on social media, or indeed in the mainstream media. And that's specifically in the case of Stephen Kenny. You'd like to see that pattern broken and say, we're in here now for, if not the long haul, a good solid medium-term haul. And let's not start nitpicking too soon.
Yeah, that would be my feeling exactly. We'll take a short break. I'm told there's white smoke on Declan Bogue's Skype machine in a good sense. We've got things sorted, so the gremlins have been expunged. We're going to take a short break. We've news headlines. We're back with more from Tommy Conlon of the Sunday Independent, and Declan Bogue will join us as well. Back after news headlines.
Okay.
Join the conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
Hello Ireland. Hello green hair drying. Hello green vacuuming. Green box set binging. Green hedge cutting. Hello green cups of coffee. Hello green family dinners. Hello 100% green electricity from Iberdrola, one of the world's biggest renewable energy companies. To get a great deal on energy you can feel good about, visit iberdrola.ie/hello. Iberdrola Ireland Limited guarantees your electricity is sourced from 100% renewable generation, subject to verification under the CRU's GSPV verification process after operating for a full year.
Our country remains in lockdown this Easter, but what's the exit strategy? In this week's Sunday Independent, Leo Varadkar talks exclusively to Philip Ryan, answers your questions about coronavirus, and tells us what happens next. 10 years after his death, we reflect on the life and legacy of Jerry Ryan. In sport, don't miss Paul Kimmage's in-depth interview with cyclist Nicolas Roche, plus style, beauty and food in Life magazine. The Sunday Independent. Real stories worth paying for, in print or subscribe at independent.ie.
At Centra, we have great offers for Easter, like Inspired by Centra sirloin steak 494 gram, half price at €5. Cadbury, Nestle and Mars large Easter eggs 2 for €8. And our mega deal until Monday, Budweiser and Carlsberg 20 bottle pack, €16 each. Centra, we're in this together. Enjoy.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on every aspect of our lives. We are now asked to stay at home with limited exceptions. This is especially hard for older people and those who've been advised to cocoon. Being isolated from friends and family is hard for everyone. So right now, it's important that we look out for each other and look after our neighbours. That's why national government, local government and the community and voluntary sectors have all come together to create the Community Call. To make sure that anyone who needs help can get help. And to make sure that people who would like to volunteer in their community can help where they are most needed. If you need help, if you know someone who needs help, or if you'd like to offer help, please call 0818 222 024 or call your local authority Community Call helpline. All the details are live now at gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
At Guaranteed Irish, we believe enterprise is at the heart of thriving communities.
Like Pat the Baker, whose staff are delivering freshly baked bread daily across the country. Now is the time to support Irish businesses who work tirelessly and safely to ensure the nation is nourished while we stay safe at home. Guaranteed Irish welcomes companies that are altogether better choices for our communities, so look out for it. Thank you to all the team at Pat the Baker for continuing to stock the shelves. GuaranteedIrish.ie. Altogether better.
From true crime believers to science and business achievers, sports, arts and comedy to the latest entertainment wannabe. Get political, get healthy, get educated. Get all your favourite podcasts on Go Loud. Download the Go Loud app now or add us on your smart speaker. Go Loud. Podcasts, radio and music to your ears.
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. The Taoiseach says the country will experience some of its darkest days when COVID-19 peaks here. Leo Varadkar says people's actions are making a difference, but that we need to redouble our efforts in the coming weeks. Although the spread of the virus is slowing, he's concerned about the rising death toll and number of people being hospitalised. In an Easter message, Leo Varadkar says there can be no room for complacency.
It's possible that we haven't seen the peak yet. And when it comes, perhaps later this month, we will experience some of our darkest days. So we need to maintain our discipline and resolve. in the knowledge that better days are to come.
The chair of the Coronavirus Expert Advisory Group says 15,000 tests a day will be able to be carried out by the end of next week. Cillian de Gascoigne says people should also face less of a wait to get their test results.
So it'll be within 24, 36 hours. So that's what we're aspiring towards. And to be fair, that will happen because the structures are now in place to allow that to happen.
A commemoration ceremony to mark the 104th anniversary of the Easter Rising has taken place in Dublin. It involved the ringing of the peace bell at Áras an Uachtaráin, the lowering of the tricolour to half-mast and the reading of the proclamation at the GPO. President Michael D. Higgins laid a wreath at the Áras before observing a minute's silence. In his prayer of remembrance from the GPO, the Defence Forces head chaplain, Father Seamus Madigan, spoke of those affected by COVID-19.
As we commemorate the sacrifice of those who died during 1916, we pray for our country and the challenges of these times, remembering especially all those who have died during this most difficult time.
And finally, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been released from hospital after being treated for COVID-19, but a Downing Street spokesperson says he won't immediately return to work as he recovers from the virus. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 2.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. To help in these challenging times, we've reduced the cost of our car insurance. Get our lowest price at the AA.ie.
It'll be cloudy with showery outbreaks of rain, heaviest in the south and east, becoming drier in the afternoon, mainly in Connacht and Ulster. It will be cooler than the last few days though, highest temperatures 9 to 12 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
You're welcome back. We're reviewing the Sunday papers. We have Tommy Conlon of the Sunday Independent still with us, and I'm hoping Declan Bogue, freelance journalist, you can hear me. Hello?
I can hear you, Joe. How are you?
Where the hell have you been?
One of them missed.
Oh, where do I start? You've missed everything. You've missed all the good stuff.
Brilliant. Okay.
Well, good to have you with us all the same. So we just touched really in the main, Declan, I know you've been reading the papers as well today on Stephen Kenny, who's adorned the back pages, and there's been various pieces inside on him. To continue the Irish football team for a moment, Tommy Conlon, who is with us, as people know at this stage, and Paul Rowan in the Sunday Times have had a look at the financial agreements in place, particularly with regard to Mick McCarthy and Robbie Keane, and had some things to say. Tommy, do you want to outline the gist of the point you're making on Mick McCarthy's package?
Yeah. I hope I made clear in the piece that Mick is legally entitled to it all. I just think morally it's questionable that he should take it all. And then specifically, I mean the 1.2 million exit payment, so-called. And that money wasn't John Delaney's to give away like that. The FAI, as we know, was virtually bankrupt. We discovered, did the deal with Mick in November 2018.
On Mick McCarthy's package?
Yeah. And then we discovered that in December 2019 that the FAI owed €55 million. And Delaney was playing with other people's money. The FAI's money.
Let's get very quickly into being very precise with our language here, Tommy, for obvious reasons. Okay.
Okay.
So he wasn't playing with anyone's money. He was a CEO of the FAI. He was negotiating with a new manager. He offered him terms. It certainly seems there was confusion over the length of McCarthy's deal, and McCarthy may have been under the impression that he was getting a 4-year contract. Then that subsequently changed, and the arrangement with Stephen Kenny coming in afterwards obviously came into being, and Mick McCarthy negotiated a deal with John Delaney. John Delaney did so on behalf of the FAI. So let's be as precise as we can be on all of this. But your point is specifically which payment is most problematic?
The only payment, he's as we understand it, he has got 1.8 million in salary. That's fine. it's the 1.2 million specifically, the golden handshake, the exit payment. And here's where I see your need for precision here, Joe, so I'll try to be precise as well. It is ultimately the FAI's contract with Mick McCarthy. Yes, it is. But we have enough evidence, and I've cited some of it, of where the CEO, basically these contracts were essentially, the evidence is telling us, conducted almost as a solo run by the CEO, and it will be nodded through at board level. So it's officially an FAI contract, but you have someone leaving like Donald Conway, and he was asked specifically about managers' contracts last October, where he says the contracts were not put across the board table and scrutinised at the board table. The contracts were drafted, and you'd get a report at the board table. And if I may add to that, if that might be considered hearsay, the official Deloitte auditors' financial report last December to the AGM of the FAI, and I quote from that report. So this is the FAI's own auditors saying this, that it found there were, quotes, undeclared transactions, undetected misstatements, absence of internal audit and compliance functions, previously unrecorded contracts, a material breakdown in internal control.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, there's no doubt the way the FAI run was, let's use the word questionable, to say the least. Okay. The thing was not being run correctly. That is clear, and there's obviously a report with the Gardaí. That's how serious this is, and that's how badly deals have been done. So your point, and you do make it clear in the piece, in fairness to you, that Mick McCarthy legally has done nothing wrong here. Mick McCarthy is legally entitled to benefit from the deal that he agreed in good faith with the FAI. I mean, if somebody, or if any of our employers negotiate with us, we do so in good faith, But your point is what? That he should be cognizant of how badly things seem to have been run and the financial situation of the FAI, and to waive the golden handshake.
Yeah, I think legally he's on absolutely solid ground, and morally, I think that 1.2 million, he should think seriously about it, given all the circumstances that led to that deal, and all the, and not the least that the FAI was almost insolvent then, and still has this enormous debt hanging over it, and the unique circumstances of that deal. And I don't think he should take it. Declan, I think the money is. Sorry. I think the money is tainted.
Tainted, yeah. Declan, do you want to come in? I know you read the piece. What are your thoughts on Mick McCarthy and his situation? Which again, he's probably scratching his head a bit and saying, I negotiated all of this in good faith.
Yeah. Tommy has to be applauded. Tommy can only talk about what you're putting to him, but it's all laid out there. And when the revelations about the sort of financial conduct of the FAI was being revealed and published at the time, it was a steady drip, and it was, that's interesting. Oh my God, that's a little bit. That's a wee bit over the top there. My God, Jesus, that's ridiculous money. And then Tommy does a real gut punch about a third of the way down, where he starts just throwing out salary, cash withdrawals, dry cleaning service, all that kind of thing. And it just shocks you when you see it with that little bit of a remove from, it's probably about a year since papers went big in these revelations. And then to see it a year on, in black and white like that, all together and condensed, it is shocking, like the stuff that was going on. My impressions of it was Tommy's taken a brave position here, probably one that Mick is a bit of a darling of Irish soccer and all the rest, and he's entirely right. I mean, these figures are eye-watering. I mean, you know, even towards the end, where Tommy actually points out midway through it, he says Irish football has been good. It has been really, really good to Mick McCarthy. He has had a nice time of it for a player that was made the most out of himself. But, you know, at the same time, as he said and points out here, he's 1.8 million salary earned for 10 games over 8 months in 2019. The team performances were usually dire and sometimes dire. Finished third in the qualifying group, and they scored 7 goals in 8 games. I mean, on what planet does anyone believe that they are entitled to a golden handshake like that for having done such a job? And the truth of the matter is, Mick could probably pick up another job in the Championship that'll pay huge money. But it is it's one of these legacy payments that's left over from the way things were done. Does it make it right? No. And there's further complications with the Robbie Keane situation. But I mean, Tommy nails it here, and he says, legally, McCarthy is apparently entitled to every single cent. Morally, that's a different story. Now, you couldn't come up with a better closing sentence to this situation than what Tommy did.
Yeah, to play devil's advocate for a second, because Mick's not here, and obviously, you know, he might want to defend himself, I'm sure. So he negotiates in good faith. He is under the impression he's getting a 4-year deal. Some strange things seem to happen, and then it's Stephen Kenny and the succession plan, and suddenly all the terms he seemed to have agreed are up in the air, and they work out a deal. And he does that in good faith. Now, the sums of money are eye-watering, okay, and they will gall people for sure, and the FAI's financial situation is a factor here. But is the man not entitled to what is owing to him? And you know, for all we know, he's given away all that money to charity. Like, why should he be held accountable here for the FAI not having their house in order? And also, if we're talking about this deal stinking, then that will have to apply to Robbie Keane. Should that not apply to Stephen Kenny? I mean, where do we draw the line here? Does it come down to the amounts? And so if you get into this territory, and also if you're pressurising someone, well, that's not fair on you, Tommy. You're not pressurising it. You're giving your opinion, but it's in the paper and people will read it. Is that fair on Mick, who negotiated in, again, completely above board, good faith? It's huge money, so it's hard to argue anyone deserves $1 million for anything, you know. But I'm trying to put forward that case as best I can, and so that applies to Robbie Keane as well. Does it apply to Stephen Kenny? Does it apply to everyone here?
Declan, do you want to take that?
Sorry, I thought that was for you, Tommy. No, you can make that argument, and you can say he did negotiate. And I hate to use the hospital bed analogy. You can use that for everything. But at a time where the FA are being bailed out, I just think that kind of largesse just doesn't belong in the conversation. By the
way, I agree it shouldn't have happened. I'm not arguing it should have happened. This deal should not have been done.
The world's a very different place today, as we sit in it now, right now, than it was when he negotiated the deal. And you can say that it was fine at the time he negotiated it. We weren't aware of exactly what was going on when contracts were being talked about and agreed. We now know that things went on that were absolutely a national scandal. As I said, the world's a very different place, and Ireland as a country could be doing with some of that money. You say, well, you know, it could be giving it all away into charity anyway, and that would be wonderful. That would be just lovely, but that would also have to be maybe publicly, the public would have to be made aware of that, and maybe that's what he would choose to do. But by God, like, it is ridiculous to think that that nothing changes. Just simply because, well, you know, we agreed this, and this is the way the world was at that time, and everything, nothing changes.
And when you say the world has changed, are you talking about the pandemic, or are you talking about the FAI finances?
Well, I am talking about the pandemic in particular, but the FAI finances, like, we're much more aware of them now, and how, you know, the whole thing is going to have to be structured. All the sort of financial stuff that was going on and people being let off and all the rest. I mean, now now that we are equipped with that knowledge, surely we should be making better decisions about how money is actually spent, or if people are receiving large monies and they know all of this, then maybe it would do them no harm to reconsider.
Yeah. Tommy, do you want to come in and have a final word on it? I'm going to move to Paul Rowan's piece in a moment.
To go back to the expression you used earlier, Joe, and I think you took it back then about that I was pressurising Mick.
Yeah, I think that's unfair. I know you're not doing that, but it could snowball into that, I suppose, Tommy, and that's where you feel that would be unfair on McCarthy.
No, I was actually going to say it's fair to say that.
Okay.
By virtue of writing the piece at all, it does put it'd be disingenuous to say that it doesn't put pressure, even if he's totally oblivious to the article and remains so.
Yeah.
The fact that one puts it in the public domain, and I was anxious not to personalise it in any way, or even to use the sort of emotional blackmail of saying, that's money that could go to staff, keep jobs in the FAI. Ultimately, that's not McCarthy's or wasn't his remit when he was signing that contract. But I just think morally that money is, that 1.2 million is compromised.
Okay. Yeah, I think, look, I'm sure lots of people will agree with you. And Paul Rowan has applied a similar logic, I would say, to the Robbie Keane situation. A very unhappy ending is the headline. This is in the Sunday Times, and he talks about how Keane has more than €250,000 a year left on his contract. He says at one point about what happens going forward. It's believed Keane wants the matter handled through his representative. Keane had a conversation last Saturday, which was said to be animated, with his friend and his former teammate Niall Quinn, now obviously working as interim deputy CEO. When the dust settles on this one, i.e. this deal, the inquest on why Robbie Keane was given a 4-year contract in the first place back in November 2018 need only be a relatively brief one. It came at a time when Delaney's tenure was nearing its much publicised end. And he goes on to say later on, Paul Rowan, that Delaney told the board back in November 3rd, 2018, that this was when O'Neill was still manager. He had a plan in action where Kenny would become under-21 manager, Keane would be assisting the managing of the team with Mick McCarthy and eventually becoming the manager. And then Paul Rowan says that it was Stephen Kenny's insistence that he would replace McCarthy instead. That threw Delaney's aspiration off track, but still the CEO was determined not to get on the wrong side of Keane, who he considered a friend. So to wrap up the piece, Paul Rowan says, rejected by Kenny, Robbie Keane's country still needs him now in a different way. Let's hope that he emerges from this in a manner befitting Ireland's leading goal scorer. Keane's agent refused to comment on Friday. So the insinuation there is clear again, Tommy. 250 grand over the next 2 years. Stephen Kenny, and it reflects well in Kenny that he hasn't budged under, you suspect, pressure along the way here to incorporate Robbie Keane, which I'm sure would have made this whole situation a lot more easy to deal with. But Kenny hasn't budged, and that bodes well for the future. But it does leave the Robbie Keane dilemma. 250,000 a year, not with the 21s, not with the senior team. Paul Rowan mentions there's been the mooting of an ambassadorial role. Some kind of negotiation, we presume, will be underway in terms of a settlement package with Robbie Keane, and that's probably where that situation is. Again, that's a legacy of that deal in late 2018.
Robbie, as we know, always had a great welcome for himself, and he's kind of he'd want to be careful that he doesn't allow his ego get in the way of tarnishing his legacy here. I think he should be very careful about his next move, be it about the finances that he's entitled to, or throwing a tantrum about not getting a job somewhere in the FA. He's around long enough to know that every manager picks his own staff, and that's an absolutely inviolable principle for any manager. He picks his own staff, and if he doesn't pick Robbie or anyone else, that's just too bad, but that's how it goes.
No, I think everyone agrees with that. Stephen Kenny absolutely has to pick his own backroom team. What for Robbie Keane and how this is sorted out then, Declan?
Hello, sorry, Joe. Do you find it odd in that piece, in the two pieces that Paul has done here? You know, you sort of get an insight into what's been said across the dining table when it said that Keane's wife, Claudine, complained on social media about a lack of respect shown to her husband. And if that's not a clearest indication of just what his gut feeling is behind all the spin, then I don't know what. And the other thing in fairness,
and I'm doing a lot of in fairness in here because we're talking about people who aren't here and they deserve to be to kind of get their right of reply. What she was talking about there was that they were finding, the Keane family and Robbie Keane was finding out things through the media first. And that's not right either. He deserves better treatment than that. So I think she's entitled to point that out. That's
a caveat that I wasn't aware of. That's fair enough. But the fact that, you know, that there's not an awful lot of face-to-face stuff. Like, you know, Stephen had said that he couldn't actually deal with Robbie because of complex contractual stuff, and that Robbie wanted it sorted out through Kieran Madler. Like, it's just like the world, that whole world just seems so just the multi layers that they all put between themselves rather than going directly to each other, finding out what their feelings are and working towards a resolution in any kind of conflict like that. It bugs me that these people aren't able to actually even pick up the phone to each other.
Well, it did say there he spoke with Niall Quinn reportedly in the piece, and again, like, I mean, if you're Robbie and making these instances, you're allowed to say, well, hang on, I made an agreement. Like, if you made an agreement with your employer and then they just turn around and said, oh, look, the world's changed. Sorry about that. Everything we told you, everything we said to you is now gone because, well, it turns out we weren't running the thing very well. Would you not feel, well, that's not on me? Like, in fairness, like, so I think Robbie's entitled to have his representative talk. I know what you're saying. I do know what you're saying. But maybe he doesn't feel equipped to get into the legalities of a contract.
Yeah, well, maybe, you know, these things could be sort of agreed in principle, or at least a dialogue opens, and then, you know, the lawyers come in after that and nail things down. But yeah, point taken, Joe.
Right. Look, I'm trying to be fair to everyone concerned here, but I suspect I may be in the minority on this one. Will we move?
Joe, I appreciate you making the counter arguments. They have to be made, and in my case or any other case where you're advancing, where I'm advancing an argument, it has to be quite a challenge, and it has to be deconstructed and the flaws in the argument exposed. So no, I mean, the counter argument is essential to the whole thing of maybe getting closer to the right result in any situation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the Mick ship has sailed unless he wants to go back and revisit the thing. Although I don't know what happens with the Euro. I mean, the potential of a Euros bonus seems ludicrous, and you know that would really stick in the craw. I think of a lot of people if Mick McCarthy was to receive a bonus for Stephen Kenny qualifying Ireland for the Euros, given Mick McCarthy had nothing to do with getting to the playoff, and that one is potentially down the road. The Robbie Keane thing is still up in the air. Ultimately, Robbie Keane can decide how to handle this whole situation, and we'll have to see how he decides to do it.
He may well do. He may end up doing the right thing, or what we might consider the right thing anyway, and have to give him, give him the possibility, allow him the possibility that he will maybe stand back from it and reflect on it all, and maybe do the statesman-like thing on it all, and you know what goes around comes around, and you like to think that if someone does the right thing at a certain time, that maybe there'll be good karma will come down the tracks sometime in the future.
Fellas, I'm going to take a short break. There's a brilliant interview with Nicolas Roche I want to touch on, and a few other pieces besides. We're going to be back in 1 second with Tommy Conlon and Declan Bogue.
Off the ball on News Talk. The Pat Kenny Show.
On Bank Holiday Monday, 2 hours of COVID-free listening. The journey of a kilo of cocaine from Colombia to Europe. Musings from Phil Coulter, Michael Harding and Bernard O'Shea. We'll go behind the scenes of the movies, and we'll play some great music for the Bank Holiday.
The Pat Kenny Show.
Tomorrow morning from 9.
On News Talk.
The National Standards Authority of Ireland have published a series of business guidance documents to help businesses struggling to deal with the impact of COVID-19. Whether you're a small retailer or a large manufacturer, we can offer you practical steps to help you meet the public health guidelines and reduce the risk of spreading infection. For more information on our guidelines and how to contact us, visit us at nsai.ie. This is an initiative of the Government of Ireland.
At Electric Ireland, we're here to help 1.2 million homes save on their energy costs by lowering prices from the 1st of April. Every customer will benefit, with up to €100 in annual savings for homes with gas and electricity. That's millions more in pockets across the country. On top of lower prices, our customers will still enjoy a discount rate that doesn't disappear. Find out more about what we're doing for our customers at electricireland.ie, because we're brighter together. Prices valid from 1st of April 2020, subject to change. EAB €1,636, based on average annual consumption, urban 24-hour discounted unit rate, standing charge, PSO levy and carbon tax. Residential dual fuel direct debit and online billing. T's and C's apply. See electricireland.ie/EAB. Savings based on annual consumption.
Hello, it's me again, the TV. Last Friday night was a little awkward. My family all gathered around for a big night in, but I had nothing they felt like watching. They were channel hopping like crazy. But this weekend, they were in for a right treat. Now we've got Now TV, I can stream whatever they're in the mood for. Movies, dramas, comedy, there's loads to choose from.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus month passes auto renew. Terms apply.
Some of us have gone from 5K back to the couch. Keeping active will help you feel well. For ideas on getting active from the comfort of your living room, go to gov.ie/together. An initiative of the Government of Ireland.
5 a.m, boots on, sun not even up. Down to the field to collect the herd. First milking of the day, and it's only getting started.
Dairy farmers are doing what they've always done, caring for the land and their grass-fed cows, working to keep fridges stocked with quality fresh Irish milk. Milk to keep families fed and nourished. Support Irish dairy farmers by choosing milk with the green rosette, our guarantee of local freshness. From the National Dairy Council.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Welcome back. So we have Declan Bogue with us, freelance journalist, and we have Tommy Conlon of the Sunday Independent as well on the paper review. You're working me hard, fellas. I'm kicking hard here under the water.
Hi, Joe.
So can we turn to page 4 and 5, where the photography is phenomenal, and that is very much in keeping with this piece. This is Paul Kimmage interviewing Nicolas Roche, and
yeah,
you'd have to say, in terms of what he manages here to elicit from Nicolas Roche, where effectively he's detailing his love life, his marriage, his divorce, it is not just very good, it's exceptional, Tommy.
Yeah, it is, Joe. Very interesting. And before we get on to the copy, as you say, a quick tip of the hat to David Conaghy for the photography and the front page photo. It could be out of a French movie, you know. And Nicolas, albeit has represented Ireland at the Olympics, as a Frenchman doing a quintessentially French sport, and I think there's something kind of moody, something arty about David Conaghy's, that front page photo in particular, and the tattoo running down Nicolas Roche's back and that, and it's a lovely piece of work visually. I was a bit taken aback when I saw the tattoos, the ink, the verse down Nicolas Roche's back. I thought, well, this is going to be something really profound, but it turns out it's the lyrics from an Ed Sheeran song. And I was thinking, well, come on, Nicolas, you know, if you're going to go to that much trouble, would you not put on a Bob Dylan or a Tom Waits quote or Leonard Cohen? Why does it have to be Ed Sheeran? But I guess maybe that's the generation gap thing, Joe.
No, I would tend to agree, but each to their own. Each their own.
Each to their own. And to go back to your main point about what Kimmage does here, and I would venture to say, he's maybe the only sports journalist in the world who is capable of doing something like this, because this is about a cyclist on the road, and you think, okay, right, well that's pretty unsurprising. A cyclist lives on the road, makes his life doing the miles on the road. But it's about a cyclist on the road in the other sense of that term, of being on the road in terms of being away from home, more like the rock bands and comedians and entertainers who go from hotel to hotel, do their gig, move on the next day to the next hotel, the next gig. And it's life on the road in that sense that Kimmage has captured here, which makes it fascinating. And reading it, there's a very telling quote in it where you realise where Nicolas Roche admits to himself and to us, he's an institutionalised road warrior, knight of the road, like all those guys in show bands and showbiz who've done it before. And he says it here. It is the words of an institutionalized guy who has no home really. And he says it's the life, the traveling, the hotel to hotel. Even in winter, I need to travel. I just got back from Sam Bennett's wedding, and I'm leaving tomorrow for Budapest. I'm addicted to airports. I can't stay still. Mm. And what havoc does that cause to relationships? A lot.
Yeah.
And Paul has, and he did this with discuss this thing, this seldom talked about thing with sportsmen and sports interviewers, is how usually the interview is about the job, the sport, but rarely touches on the life behind, the life off the road, and the relationships, the marriages, the finances, all of that. And that's what makes this piece fascinating, I think.
It does, because, I mean, even those of us who try and scratch away at the person, you might get a little bit on their internal life or some of their experiences away from a sport. But generally, marriages and finances tend to stay another layer behind all of that. So this interview has conversations, and we can't sum up the interview because it hops from different year to different year and back and forth. But for instance, it has conversations like this, where he has met his future wife. They were engaged within a year, and he's talking about the lead up to the marriage, and he says, I made the reservation. He's talking about a property here. I made the reservation online during training camp, paid the 30% deposit a month later, but the ink hadn't dried, writes Paul Kimmage, on the contract when it was causing problems. Nicolas wrote, she wanted half the value of the house before we were married, he says. Why was that an issue, I ask? Wasn't she going to be entitled to that anyway? No, we had a prenup. A prenup? Yeah, that was the agreement. How did that work? What's mine was mine and what's hers was hers. Why did you want a prenup? To protect myself. How many athletes have lost everything or had their lives or careers ruined by divorce? It's one of the biggest reasons for depression in sport. So there was doubt in your head. No, I wanted to protect myself. But yeah, there's ... Paul Kimmage, how do I balance the prenup with the love songs on your skin? Says Nico Roche. You're a romantic. Yeah. A prenup is not romantic. No. You don't get the point I'm trying to make. No, I agree with you. And looking back, we should not have married. I think I was trying to prove that I could have this settled life and be married and have kids and buy a house. I was thinking, I'm 33. I think she's the one. Maybe it's time. So that gives a sense of the territory you're getting into here. Declan, you picked it out as well.
Yeah, and pretty much all the notes I had made to say, Tommy just came in and swooped them all up and gobbled them. The imagery is astonishing. David Conley's pictures here, and Nico's French art house kind of influence, I imagine, must have led him to agree to be photographed in such a kind of candid form and such a. I don't know if it's ironic, him with the hairdryer here. It's absolutely brilliant, though. Again, disappointed Ed Sheeran. I just thought there might have been a wee bit more. It might have been some Sauter or something like that. But I mean, when he talks about life on the road and not being able to make his marriage work, is there a line where he actually says he figured out that he was just happier on his own?
He does, yeah. He literally says that, yeah.
Yeah, that was the gut punch for me, because that's desperate, and to think there's a daughter in the mix there, and him then years later scrambling to try and form some kind of relationship and learn patience with the child when he's out in the park and all that. I mean, I don't know, any kind of father would look at that and just, they would have tremendous pity. It's very different. Obviously, like, you know, the piece is cobbled together from years of conversations, and Nico being in Paul's trust, or Paul being in Nico's trust. You know, yeah, Tommy's right. Like, there's very, very few people in the world that could do that, or could have the relationship with the athlete in order to compose a piece so long, almost exclusively on his ability or inability to have meaningful relationships. It's quite different than a lot of stuff that Paul has done in recent years, in that, like, he's gone away from the Q&A format. And while the Q&A format works very well for a lot of people, sometimes I think that Paul's writing wings are clipped slightly by it, because he's a great stylist too, and that's the way it worked out here. He was able to get his style. He was able to get his context here, and sometimes that's very important.
Yeah, no, it's
Joe,
yeah, go on, Tommy. Sorry.
There, Paul did this. Cast me back to some of his interviews with Tony Cascarino, back maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I felt it was groundbreaking interviews at the time, because obviously Paul had done the book, that really actually critically acclaimed book at the time, Tony's memoir. But subsequent to that, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where again Cascarino delved into how relationships are destroyed by professional sportsmen living in their bubble, this parallel universe, and when they have to leave that bubble and try to simulate conventional orthodox life of the family life at home, so many of them cannot do it. And it's well documented issue in American sport and British sport. Of so many very wealthy professional sportsmen down on the luck by the age of 40. And Tony Cascarino went deep into the finances and the legal and the heartbreak of broken marriages and children not being there for the children, but also the money, and how it leaves so many players close to destitute. And again, and Paul is touching on that, I think, really neglected theme here.
Yeah, and I guess it's neglected because sports people just don't want to go near it for obvious reasons. Because Nicolas Roche here tacitly admits that really his actions caused the breakup, you know? And he says that a boyhood friend said, "You're a monster, Nico." And then things got really shitty, writes Paul, because Nico's behaviour on the road wasn't maybe what he might have aspired for it to be. So who's going to want to bear all in a newspaper about that? And that's maybe one of the reasons it's neglected, and that's why it's so
I agree.
Compelling to read.
Do you know what song popped into my mind as I was reading this piece? And it's like, if you were to put a soundtrack to this interview, it'd be Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street. Does that ring any bells with you, lads?
No, but I'll listen to it on the way home. What am I looking out for?
There's a famous line. He has this dream about buying some land. He's going to give up the booze and the one-night stands and finally settle down in a quiet little town and forget about everything. I hasten to add that I'm not saying Nico was either on the booze or given to one-night stands, but the line is, he's a rolling stone, he's a rolling stone.
Yeah, well, there's loads in this. After the fallout from the marriage, he saw a therapist in Monaco, but did most of his healing in Dublin with his grandparents, Larry and Bunny. My granny's the boss of the family. She's the one trying to ease the tension. She's someone special. My granddad is the lecture giver. He'll sit with me when I make the porridge at breakfast and give me the lessons of life. So all of that stuff is in there. It's exceptionally good. It really is an incredible piece.
Joe, I don't mean to hijack any kind of conversation here.
I suspect you're about to.
It's just something that myself and Tommy were communicating about this, and this is a Sunday paper review, and that's fine. You look at through all the Sunday newspaper and find the quality of reads and so on. You go from there. But if you're to do a sort of a paper review, I think there was a couple of developments this week that were extremely troubling, very worrying for a lot of people. And that is just the demise in this age of coronavirus of local newspapers. I mean, Newry Reporter told us this week that they were going to maybe fold up their tents for a few weeks. the Cross McLean Examiner. I know that I'm talking about ones that are exclusively in the north here, but Tommy would have his finger in the pulse down there too, especially west of the Shannon. Gaelic Life, which I spent a few years at, are going from a newspaper to digital only. And we know how that journey goes. I mean, that's probably not a return ticket anytime soon. I'm just looking at all these newspapers. Anglo-Celtic, another one that in Cavan, like you're talking about 130 odd years of history with that newspaper, and they are hanging by a thread, same as other ones, which I'd probably not fair to name them right through the country. But these were, in terms of sport, like, you know, this is the first place, the first sort of landing spot for sports writers. Myself, I started off in the Fermanagh Herald. And, you know, as the years have gone on, these newspapers, you know, they're an old dog that people like to give a kick and say, so there's nothing in the Herald. And then you actually look at it through journalist eyes and see, well, you know, over the last number of years, there's been a guy there, John Hughes, that has done basically Sunday newspaper quality coverage almost, in terms of match reports and graphics panels and all these kind of things that he's introduced into a local paper. Astonishing work has gone on in these newspapers. And if you look back 20 years, 30 years, the improvements in all the local newspapers in every respect, layout, content, everything has been just immense. And like, you know, over the next 6 months, how many of them will survive? I mean, it's an absolute tragedy. And I think that, you know, if we're reviewing newspapers or talking about them in an abstract way, perhaps we need to give some attention to this and look very closely at this and what help they could get. I mean, what's Tommy, for example, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, the exact same, Declan. Really, really saddened. And I mean, they're part of your growing up, part of your life. Every local paper is has that institutional presence and such deep roots in the local community. It's telling the story of that, of their county to that county, and doing it week in, week out, and you don't want to romanticize it too much, because it's daily bread and butter material a lot of the time, and the newspaper is seen, but it's just an institutional presence, and you fear for local areas or counties or whatever area the papers are serving, if a sort of a major, if something like that, with its binding, with its power to the ties that bind, has power to kind of bring a community together and be part of that as a fulcrum almost at times around that community. And I dread to think of a landscape that wouldn't have those newspapers there. I find it really sad, and I'm really hoping that they will survive this crisis as they've survived many crises in the last 100 years.
You know, because it's just like, you know, I mean, they are first draft of history and all that cliche kind of stuff, but they're a watchdog. You know, local councils and local government and all that, you know, it keeps them in check. And even just, you know, provides a service for the people who want to know where the bridge drive is. They want to play a hand at 25. There are many people that will read the club notes of every single club in the county, for example, in the like of the Fermanagh Herald or the Ulster Herald serve in Tyrone. And, you know, if these, you know, I mean, put it this way, if you've 8 pages of entertainment advertising, and the local pub in the village has a fella in the corner on a Friday night and a woman in the corner on Saturday night playing an acoustic guitar, and they have to pay their few pound to get that ad in, well, then that's all over now. And it might be over for months and months. And the truth is, it might not come back. And then you've got this void. Because, I mean, I worked for local papers in England and around the Midlands and that, and they were free sheets, and they were horrible, soulless, terribly produced efforts altogether. And people have no idea about the richness of the local Irish newspaper. Like, you know, I'm just wondering, there could be some kind of government help for it. Now, I know that some local governments would be just, they'll hardly shed too many tears for some of these publications. But it's certainly worth, in the greater scheme of things, is it worth that much of a conversation? It's worth at least opening up some lines of communication about these.
Yeah, no, it's a point well made. I mean, the solution is obvious, it's money, but there'll be a long queue. But maybe it serves enough of a service, or provides enough of a service for it to justify being reasonably high up in that queue. I haven't spent any real time in the UK, so I hadn't really appreciated the difference in tone of the local papers in the UK versus Ireland.
And Joe, Declan makes a point there too. The professionalism of the reporting has never been better, I think, in local papers. The layout, design, it's never been better. There's journalists and photographers and graphics and layout design people doing stunning work, week in, week out. And you'd hope enough people in all their local communities appreciate it and don't take it for granted.
And how have sales been with local papers over the last decade?
Declan?
You could really just draw a line along the lines of national newspapers, just falling. I think the recession in 2008, to be very careful here, but it gave newspapers an opportunity to trim a wee bit of fat, and even some local newspapers would have put together the scheme where they wouldn't have actually give say, for example, the cost of living allowance. That was off the table for a number of years. And what that actually comes to is actually a reduction in wages, really, when it goes on long enough. And now this time, you might be tempted to say some newspapers look at it as an opportunity to finally sort of finish it off and everyone get out intact, all the shareholders. But it's much more grave than that, really. Like, that this is just this is a dead end, it would almost seem. And the other thing is, like, is the popularity of Facebook, the spread of Facebook, and how it targets, how it can target sales. Say, for example, something like Cavan GA ran a draw, and they spent some money on Facebook to do targeted advertising, and the return out of it was spectacular. Now, don't press me on the figures, but I remember talking to someone who was very close to this, and then, like, they could spend X amount of money in the Anglo-Celt, and they have no idea really what return out of that they have. But they can track exactly on Facebook how much money nearly came in from people that viewed that ad on Facebook. And that's the threat here.
Yeah, and you're giving me the impression that almost a majority of these local papers are under very, very significant and immediate threat. Is that what you're hearing?
Talking around the country. Yeah, there was another one in Down too that went. It actually went to the wall. Its name escapes me. I'm sorry. But there's just no way. Like, I'm lifting newspapers in the local shop here, and they've never felt them thinner. And they're thinner for the simple reason that there's no advertising pages. Like, that's your entertainment supplements are going. Your sport, some of the stuff that's being put in there is kind of bizarre, but it's like literally people don't have any time right now, or else they're down to real skeleton staff. So, I mean, I wouldn't like to make predictions, but the idea of closing up for a few months is probably the most sensible and prudent, because no one's in the shops. Nobody's actually in the shops to buy newspapers at the moment.
Yeah, okay, it's a very fair point and worth highlighting. We have, fellas, about 5 minutes. If there are any other pieces that you haven't had a chance to mention that you want to give a quick mention to, Tommy, shout.
Philip Lanigan, lovely two-page spread with Derek McGrath. We'd all expect a certain standard of sort of imagination, really, from Derek McGrath and how he looks at things. And we get it here as well across. Derek, of course, being a teacher, so that he talks a lot about the Leaving Cert and all those issues, and then on to sport and hurling, and there's an interest. Philip asks some interesting questions, and as a result, gets interesting answers. And we talked about Kimmage earlier, and indeed your good self, Joe Rennie, you know that the more creative the questions, the more creative the answers. And so Philip puts it to him. He says, in a sense, is it not because the discussion is on sport and keeping sport in perspective and all like that in these times. And Philip says, in a sense, is it not a manager's job to overplay the importance of sport, to make it matter, to make what you are doing feel like it is the most vital thing in life right at that moment? And of course, McGrath accepts that and acknowledges that he does that, but also then acknowledging that in reality it is part of a broader picture, and that it's possible to have both positions, that it means everything. And especially if you're the manager of a team, it means it is the alpha and omega of all our lives right this moment. And then McGrath says, but the crisis will make people realise that sport can be everything and is everything. It sustains hope, for instance, through all of this. It keeps us going. The whole idea of making memories, of living in the now. And it's worth reading. It's a very nice piece, in my opinion.
You see that going back to the documentary on the game about hurling, just developing that point that Tommy makes. It was Joe Conley talking about having a family bereavement, and they were talking about what does hurling mean and all this. And he says it actually means effing more than ever. It means more than anything right now, because that's what gets you back into society. It gets you back into the groove of socialising in among your community. I mean, there's a line in here where Phil got out of Derek about at the National League semi-final of 2015 against Tipperary, right? I remember saying to Dan Shanahan with about 10 minutes to go, geez, Dan, this is a great day to be alive, to be enjoying this. I know it sounds corny. It nearly frees you from thinking you have to get the win or not. Now, since all this has happened, I've been, I would help out local club coaching and senior football, and then what I've been, do a wee bit of underage and hurling. But I've been having conversations with loads of different kind of coaches around Ulster, and I've always sort of asked them one question: is see the first game that you send the team out after all of this, what's going to be in your head? I know you're going to be revving up a team in a dressing room and all to do their best, but will you care if you win or lose whatsoever? And every one of them said no, wouldn't give a damn. I wouldn't give a damn if we're beat by 5 points or 10 points. Just want to go out there and enjoy it. And developing on from that, that's the manager speaking, who are generally hardwired to win. There's one fella in the local club that wouldn't particularly like doing a pile of running and training sessions. And he gave me an awful laugh about 2 weeks ago, because he tweeted up, he says, I am never, ever, ever going to complain about a training session with no footballs in it after all this.
Yeah, it's very true. As we begin to bring this to a close, the clock has come against us. I suspected it would once we got moving today. Your own experience of this, Tommy, your own perspective on how you've been living your life, how you're going to live your life, is it too glib to say that's been profoundly shaken, or will you revert to type very, very quickly?
No, I'll probably revert to type, Joe.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely hungry for live sport. Really missing it.
Right.
I miss. I live on my own, so the self-isolation thing isn't a big thing for me, and I work from home. I do miss my Saturday nights and the few pints with a few mates on a Saturday night, getting out of your house, getting into the heart of Saturday night, as Tom Waits sang. And I've always loved that Saturday night ritual. I still do it. I really miss that. I really miss sport. Otherwise, I feel lucky and blessed.
What about you, Declan?
I don't live on my own. I live with a very patient wife and 3 children under the age of 4. So I don't have the time I miss sport, because it's the way you work, and it's what you do. and it kind of defines you. And outside of work, then I'm involved in a wee bit of coaching and all that, and committees, all that kind of thing. So it really is sort of my life. But at the moment, it's just going from one child to the next and weaning one and pushing another on the swing and wrestling bad guys with the other. So that's just the way it keeps me occupied, Joe.
I did hear someone say that if there's going to be a baby boom here, they'll all be firstborn off the back of this crisis, that's for sure. So I'm sure you have your hands full, to say the least. Listen, fellas, thanks so much for doing that and for taking the time and getting the papers. It was really good stuff. Loads of brilliant opinion and analysis in there. So Tommy Conlon, who's doing brilliant stuff at the moment in the Sunday Indo, I'm sure you've seen. My thanks to you, Tommy, and Declan Bogue, a freelance journalist in various places. Thanks a million, Declan.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tommy.
Okay, fellas,
See you,
thanks
Declan.
again.
All the best.
There you are. You can podcast that if you came late to it. Lots of good stuff from the two lads. We're going to take a short break. We have a busy show coming up for you between 4 and 5. We will have the Golf Weekly Hour, where Frank Nobilo was the guest during the week. Really good interviewee. Played across the 80s and 90s. Was forced to retire. Arthritis cropped up and ruined his career, and he struggled with that for a few years, but he was there when Tiger emerged, and he also played with, the likes of Nicholas and Norman and Seve and a who's who going back to the late 70s, early 80s. So he was able to answer pretty much any question about golf we threw at him. And you'll know him now as a commentator on CBS and the Golf Channel. So that's on the way between 4 and 5. And next up, he is going to be live. You can throw any questions you want at him. 53106 is the text number, or you'll get him at Off the Ball. We're going to talk to Jason McAteer. That's on the way after news headlines.